UDS, and one of the... I mean, start at the beginning, actually. It's probably a good place to start. So, for a while now, Ubuntu has obviously derived from Debian, but we have a tendency to do some of our own projects, either for commercial reasons or for technology reasons. And one of the projects we've been working on for quite a while is sorting out boot. There's kind of several reasons for this. We're trying to do a Linux distribution that's actually usable by the majority of masses who do just think they have to reboot something to get it to work again. We're sort of trying to do, obviously deal with the fact that I know that when I boot my computer that plugging things in and unplugging things in is not generally a good idea. My mother doesn't. In fact, my mother's usual approach to booting is halfway through the boot, pulling out everything that's connected to the computer, just in case it causes it to go wrong. This didn't work on Ubuntu for some reason. And also that, commercial reasons, right now, netbooks, tablets, and little tiny computers are kind of the fashion, and if they take a minute to boot, you may as well just go up and use the desktop or go up and use the laptop. So fast booting is kind of important. So we've had very much sort of a project to take and look at this boot problem and solve a lot of the problems. At the same time, we've been dealing with the Linux 2.6 kernel. When we started Ubuntu 6 years ago, we actually made a very early decision at that time that the Linux 2.6 kernel was going to be the best kernel for us to base our distribution off. It, at the time, was just starting to get support for hotplug, which later became UDEV and HAL and all that. The idea that you can actually plug a camera in and it appears on the desktop and you can drag your photos from it and you can unplug your camera, plug another one in. The hotplug stuff, which didn't even exist sort of 5-6 years ago, was sort of 10 years ago, was now coming to be important. And at the time, everyone else was still on 2.4. I think we were one of the first to go 2.6. So we've also been dealing with the distribution where previously we could make assumptions about the computer. The kernel had drivers compiled into it or it didn't. Everything was a module, it wasn't. You'd have an etc modules file to load up the necessary modules on boot, and you may have had a script that kind of tried to figure it out by the old-fashioned way, but generally it was all hard-coded in those days. And we were very much, because we were starting, in some ways we were starting from Debian, in other ways we were starting from scratch, because the great thing about Debian is there's so many packages to choose from, you get to choose which ones you're actually going to put into a smaller CD distribution. So we very much had to choose some of this stuff from scratch. So we very much chose to go the hotplug router, which became UDEV later on, which is this kind of modern Linux system sort of approach we have today. So these kind of projects have been ongoing. I mean, when I started at Ubuntu, I was the dpackage maintainer here at Debian, and was doing sort of package management stuff for about 6-9 months, and then sort of got involved with the boot stuff back in it was like October, November 2004, so very, very early on, and we sort of ported Ubuntu over to using UDEV and all this kind of stuff. And we kind of started there and have been building up on that ever since. So with all these projects kind of going on, and with all of these kind of little bits, we've ended up with a situation where we took a look at, right, this is how everything boots. Your computer boots up, you get your BIOS, your kernel, your init ramfs, whatever, and then your init system comes up, and in sys5 init, that starts it works at about 11,000 lines of shell script. I actually overheard somebody today, the day before yesterday, in the Hack Lab, looking at Debian's boot system for the same reason, and they came up with 11,000 lines of shell script. And you're running all this stuff just to boot the system. There's a dependency and ordering system written in shell on top of this, or nowadays at least insert is written in C. And you're basically going to have this. You've got this very, very complex system to bring up a system, which you would think, because of its complexity and number of lines of code, is bulletproof. And it actually kind of turns out that it's not. And it turns out, let me take the most simplest example I can come up with, because it's a real-world example, and we have to deal with it, is that removable hard drives, USB hard drives, we all kind of have them to put storage on. I know my sister has one, and she's got episodes of the OC and anything else really of that kind of I think, Elk on it. Everyone has these removable drives. So, you've got your removable drive, you can put it in your FS tab, or, you use your little GUI configuration tool to make sure it's on the file system somewhere, and you boot. And you've forgotten to plug in this USB enclosure. And, well, it turns out that kind of that doesn't always work, and you end up with sometimes everything after it in FS tab doesn't come up, sometimes it doesn't get mounted, and sometimes the boot just sort of hangs for a little while and then carries on. Worse still, that's just an example if it's a data drive. If it's an external drive, or even just a separate drive, like a RAID or an LVM device, which is your /user partition or your /var partition, and that takes longer than usual to come up. The array it's on might take longer than usual to spin up. You may have turned on your laptop or your desktop and forgotten to switch on the enclosure, so lean over and switch it on, and just time it out differently. You can end up with all sorts of things falling over and collapsing on top of each other, repercussions. And that's also true of kind of networking and everything else. So we knew we had this UDEV system. We knew we had events from the kernel when devices came up. We knew that we wanted to sort of pare down the boot system to be run just what we need to run, not everything else. And we knew that if the event system allows us to remove race conditions because we know when things are available. We know when a network device is there. We know when a hard drive's there, so we can take action on that. We can synchronize these things together. And that's pretty much where Upstart came from. We started it 2006, so it's quite a long time ago now, and been steadily kind of plodding away at it ever since. And it's an init system. It replaces the sys5 init package in Ubuntu. But Ubuntu we don't have. We don't build sys5 init's binary package now. We still build init scripts from it, but. Yeah, there's a couple of bits in the source package we disable, but we certainly disable building of init from sys5 init source package. The init, this bin init binary comes from the Upstart package in Ubuntu, and we are able to then build up a completely different boot system. And in fact, it's been very much a slow, gradual process. We didn't start out with a flag day. We didn't say, right, today we're going to boot with Upstart and everything must be converted over. And this was quite deliberate. We started off with a superset of sys5 init's functionality. So sys5 init has these kind of init scripts and everything else, but that's actually sort of sys5rc. We can kind of ignore those for now. Sys5 init itself just has that init tab configuration file. And there's only a very limited amount of stuff you can do in that init tab configuration file. So it turned out it was really easy to write Upstart jobs to do exactly the same things as that init tab configuration file and encapsulate init's own internal logic towards run levels in just a little bit of code. So what we did was we replaced the init daemon, wrote a couple of jobs and some support utilities like shutdown and tellinit and so on to sit along with the init daemon and provide run level support and make sure wtemp and utemp are updated and all that kind of fun jazz. And then based on those, you can then run the sys5rc scripts, which in Debian would be intserv. In Ubuntu, we're still using sys5rc. And that still allows you to then replace the init daemon while still booting exactly as you did before. But at least now, you've got the ability to move on and experiment with the new init system and say, right, okay, well, we're booting with the old stuff. That all still works. Now let's start moving some bits over to the new stuff. And over the... Sorry, that's my throat. No, over the last year or so, we've been very much attacking this, and in fact, Ubuntu now is out of the box probably 3/4 Upstart now, and only about a quarter init, sys5 init. Sounds about right. So we've gradually been able to convert over our boot system to this new system. So that's kind of a little bit of history and tour on sys5 init, and why we wrote Upstart. Now, obviously, so as I said, I was talking to Zach at UDS. Now, for us, this is quite a major piece of work that we've done for Ubuntu, and we're very much convinced we've got a right approach here, and it's something that obviously it's a big delta for us from Debian. We've replaced the init system. That means anything with an init script is ultimately likely to be replaced, or at least forked, or well, not forked, branched. It's the right word I'm looking for in Ubuntu. We're going to have to at some point take every single package that's got an init script. We're going to have to modify that to use Upstart, which is going to build a huge branch between Ubuntu, a huge delta between Ubuntu and Debian. And we like collaborating with Debian. And we like being able to get all of our upstream changes in Debian. It's great. It means we don't have to worry about them again. Maintaining patches and merging them every 6 months is a pain in the ass. And also, it's nice to do this kind of thing and get things back into Debian. And this is something where we would like to get this back into Debian. We would like Debian to adopt Upstart and sort of be able to collaborate with you. Manoj. So yeah, please just shout out, because I do want to sort of talk with this. There are mics here, so I do want everyone to kind of shout out. I want this to be more of a BOF than me just talking. So.
Okay, so I have a kind of narrow interest. I kind of like Upstart. I would love to be able to use it. Mm-hmm. I am also interested in SE Linux and security in general.
Yep.
And even though I have had a hiatus with Debian for the last 6 months and SE Linux, I have had a hiatus. I got a new job and things take time. Mm-hmm. However, I think I'm going to be able to come back to Debian in the short order, and I would like to at least create maybe a KVM image where people can run out of the box, strict policy and running Debian, and be able to run a really secure system. One of the concerns in something like that for people who actually want to run strict policy as opposed to the old targeted policy, only part of the system is secured, is you want to minimize the amount of code that actually runs or that is variable. Mm-hmm. One of the things that is an anathema is a initRD. Mm-hmm. If you really want a secure system, you turn off modules, you build everything into your kernel, and you make sure that nothing else loads. Because that way, there are fewer chances of a bad guy adding a module. Yeah. The other thing is you don't want to divert init away in order to provide a wraparound Upstart.
Yeah.
So the sysv init has been running a patch for 6 or 7 years now, I think, or longer, where in early boot it goes and loads the security policy.
Yes.
It's a small patch, about 50 lines or so, or thereabouts when I wrote it. And there's a similar patch for Upstart. Yeah. It does add, so the complexity of the patch isn't high, but it does add libse Linux 1 as a dependency. And the more code you add to a init script, I can understand that there's some concern about whether that leads to it becoming unstable or source of bugs. Yeah. However, since I added the patch to sysv init, I think it was 2003 or 4. So it's been about at least 6 years. I have never had a bug report that libse Linux caused any problem with either dpackage or init. So it's a mature library. It's minimalistic. It's being looked over by some very smart people, smarter than me, who deal with systems running in 3-letter agencies in the United States where you can't have your machine go down while you're halfway over Afghanistan, for example. Yeah, okay. So I posit that the risk introduced by libse Linux, which is transitively essential in Debian, is going to be minimal. However, there has been very little movement on the patch that I submitted to Upstart.
So can I just get the projector on as well? I just want to actually demo something on the projector while I'm doing it. Okay, so SE Linux and Upstart, where I can just summarize for you. There's two things. Where do I see SE Linux and Upstart? So Upstart, the upstream project, doesn't have support directly for SE Linux because no one's actually submitted it. And I know you've said you've submitted it, but I did, when I was talking about this on Debian Devel a few weeks ago, whenever it was, I actually looked into it, and you submitted it to the Debian bug tracking system. So the Debian maintainer has never submitted that patch to me. And there was a discussion way back when we started about SE Linux support in Upstart, and my response was pretty much, yeah, please. So in Ubuntu we use AppArmor, and that means that I tell you what, I do not care about AppArmor either. Hello.
At your leisure, just raising my hand for a mic.
Yeah.
Michael Biebel on IRC says, please let Manoj know that Upstart and Debian has been shipping this patch for the past 2 months.
Right, yeah. So, no, I was just going to come to that. Hi, Michael.
Sorry, I have been out of touch with Debian for 6 months, so I didn't know.
Hang on, I want to do two things. I want to sort of talk about SE Linux. What do you mean, error of...
Okay.
Also, Michael has submitted it to you.
He has now.
Okay, the other thing I might add, LSMs. There was some discussion way back when about choosing one particular security model. So ever since LSM came about, there have been 3 LSMs that have been accepted as SE Linux, Tomio, and AppArmor.
Yep.
Out of this, exactly one, which is SE Linux, needs a patch to the init system to bring up.
Now, actually, I was just going to talk about AppArmor as well. So AppArmor, we actually do some stuff with Upstart and AppArmor, where Upstart's model allows you to, say, have a service, and it allows another job or a service to hook into that service being started. So we use this for AppArmor to apply the AppArmor policy for that service before it comes up. And we're able to do that in the AppArmor model, because AppArmor is all about load a configuration file, cat it into the kernel. So AppArmor's been relatively low touch for me. In fact, I haven't actually had to care about it. The security team at Ubuntu care about AppArmor, and apparently my laptop doesn't care about projectors anymore. You know, I've not been able to worry about it. SE Linux, I understand, it needs to be a little bit more to worry about it. And
you had it for a second.
yeah, I know.
Maybe if you don't sit on the table.
It should work now. There we go. I have to sometimes reboot this laptop. It's Mavericks X server. Right. Hang on, let me just. So I want to talk about one thing while I'm doing it. So you know, I know with SE Linux we need a patch to the init system that loads the default system policy, then re-execs the init daemon to make sure that it takes effect for the init daemon. That's the patch Michael's got, and I have no upstream concerns with that patch. I'd like to include that upstream. I've gone back to Russell Coker. Unfortunately, we have a copyright assignment policy, so I've gone back to Russell Coker to ensure that's all dotted and crossed to make sure we've actually got the permission to include it in source code and all this kind of stuff. So that's on track. I know it's in the Debian package now, so Debian should be free to use SE Linux with Upstart in that manner. The other thing that with AppArmor, we're doing this flexible policy loading in hooks. With SE Linux, my understanding is that needs to be a little bit more in code. So actually, I just wanted to kind of show one difference. One thing you talked about was the amount of code that you have to debug. So if I bring up, if I bring up the dbus package here, we can look at the dbus init script. Let me get out of the way. So this is the init script to start the dbus daemon, which is a very simple daemon. I mean, it's a modern daemon. It's written for a bunch of things that, it just does everything the right way. It forks off into the background. And, this is the init script for it. There's a lot of code there. There's a lot of stuff that you're going to have to audit with SE Linux. There's a lot of stuff you're going to have to care about. There's a lot of stuff, you're going to have to worry about what start-stop daemon does. If an update start-stop daemon does something and opens a different file in proc, you're going to have to care about it for SE Linux. If all of this stuff, it makes it complicated for you to audit in SE Linux. We don't use this init script. We're an Upstart system. We have an etsy init dbus.conf, which fits actually in one terminal. And that does exactly the same thing. I'm not, we always talk about this idea that 10,000 lines of init, you can't take a 1,000-line init script and get rid of all that code. Actually, we didn't. That is still doing exactly the same thing as the init script. The difference is the actual bringing up the process, putting it in the right environment, adding resource limits and stuff like that can be handled by the init daemon in Upstart. The Upstart job format is not a description of how to start a service and how to stop a service. It's a description instead of what to start and what to keep running. And this, from a SE Linux point of view, should make it much easier to audit. The other thing I actually do, right back way at the beginning when someone came to me about SE Linux. Oh, apparently I could have beamed on Madonna. That way around? Doesn't really move it. Sure. Okay. And right back when we started this, I actually said I'd love to do SE Linux, and I'd like to make sure it's done right as well. So, for example, it occurred to me, the Upstart code to start a job, it occurred to me that you could have some sort of SE Linux code in there as well, so it allows you to be flexible, in defining the job, more policy restrictions and so on. I don't know whether that's appropriate or not, but someone from someone who knows about SE Linux should certainly have a look and see whether there's more useful stuff that can be done there. So I guess that kind of answers your question in a sense of, yeah, I'd like someone to do SE Linux in Upstart.
Related to this, with Upstart being different,
Yeah.
As I said, I would be happy to work with you to figure out if there's additional things that we can put in there. Policy loading is just one of the things that we can do, and policy loading, unfortunately, does have to go in early into the kernel.
Yes, indeed.
Before you do anything else. Because unfortunately, you can't run any of these scripts before policy is loaded, because by default, they'll be denied if you're running strict policy. Yeah. So you do need to load policy early, but there are all kinds of other things that so far we haven't done because it is not easy. I don't want to write init scripts for every single package that I think can benefit.
Yeah.
But this might be something that I can do.
Yeah.
This seems a lot simpler.
Yeah, it is.
And I would be happy to work with folks in Ubuntu, because I think you guys might be doing things slightly differently at this point than Debian does.
Yeah, we do. We use AppArmor, but I mean, another way of looking at it would be, from an upstream point of view of Upstart, I'm quite happy to support AppArmor and SE Linux and get.
It should be the choice of the user.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
And anything that we do in SE Linux makes it totally optional. If you don't want SE Linux, it has less than, what was it, like 1/9 of 1% overhead at startup and nothing afterwards.
Cool. Okay, cool. Thank you, Mano. Yeah, Zach.
I just wanted to, I think the good occasion of this BOF is actually looking at the Upstart issue from a higher point of view.
Yeah.
So I think the main question is, are there any specific and substantial technical objection of having Upstart in Debian? So I know there are some. I know we cannot, answer in this room, but this is a good start. And then I think the way forward is posing the same question in the appropriate place, like Devel or the Tourist team. Or
okay, I'll let Steve answer that one because.
Russ apparently was grabbing a mic. He wants to go first.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'll go ahead and proxy the main concern that I know with Upstart. And the reason why, when we talked about this with Petter last summer, things haven't moved forward since then. It's because as soon as we drop Upstart into Debian as the default init system on the Linux ports, our FreeBSD port, which is a release architecture for this cycle, is in a world of hurt, because once these facilities are available, even if you give them a policy mandate not to, people are going to be eagerly converting to the much simpler system, and then packages are just not going to work on FreeBSD anymore. So that's a significant problem that we need to resolve, this incompatibility between Upstart and FreeBSD in some fashion.
So, okay, are there plans to actually how to attack this kind of problem?
So it actually comes directly to the question that I was going to ask, which is that I have a whole bunch of packages that have init scripts, and I would love to provide Upstart scripts for people who are using Upstart. Is there any way that, but one of the problems that I'm running into right now is I haven't been able to figure out some way where I can ship an Upstart script for people using Upstart and an init script for people using the init system.
Yep.
And that seems like that would also partly address that problem, because if we require every package to have both, the Upstart script can do anything exciting and fancy that it wants to do, and the init script is still there. Over time, we may get, the BSD folks may still be somewhat unhappy because fewer people will be testing the init script, but at least they're not completely screwed.
We'd kind of ruled out that particular migration path.
We ruled out in Ubuntu. That's just one.
Well, we ruled it out as well for Debian on account of, well, first of all, because the migration path involves continuing to run sysv init scripts on a transitional basis where Upstart will call into RC.
Yeah. But I'm happy to add something to the beginning of my init script that says, if I am actually already run under Upstart, go away.
Yeah, that's quite doable.
Yeah, that makes sense.
What would it take to port Upstart to other kernels?
I have no idea. I'm just going to be pretty open here. Why is Upstart a problem for FreeBSD? The simple reason is when you go and write an init system, you start it becomes bonded to the kernel. You can write a really simple init system which isn't bonded to the kernel, but as soon as you want to do one thing, it's actually on this screen. So Upstart exec dbus daemon system fork. So that forks off into the background and everything else. So dbus forks, it actually forks twice because it's a daemon. And yeah, I can still run status dbus, and it's still got the right PID. So it's doing tracking of the PID even after forks and execs. And Upstart uses that information all the time. So that I only know how to write for Linux. Upstart also has a rich event sources. You know, the idea that it's an event-based init system means you kind of want to be able to do things when events happen, when drives appear and drives disappear and network cards appear and disappear. I only know how to do that for Linux. So what would it take to someone to port Upstart to FreeBSD would be, it needs to be a FreeBSD developer who knows the FreeBSD kernel well enough to be able to do this kind of functionality in a FreeBSD kernel. That's kind of the problem.
I would say that, as Russ said, if we can have a way to have both, actually that can even motivate people from the FreeBSD side to actually do the port more than it's motivating now to do that. I mean, if it is not used anywhere, people just don't care. Yeah, I mean, one thing to consider is that, we have this, we could, so right now in Ubuntu we're doing it differently. We've transitioned from init scripts to Upstart scripts, and only the Upstart scripts go into the binary package, and a symlink gets dropped so people to learn the difference. But that's because we don't support switching init systems in Ubuntu. But Debian, for example, there were a couple of possibilities we've mooted. The first one is that, as Steve said, the one that's kind of simplest is probably, as you say, ship both, and in the init script just don't run if the Upstart's running. And that would be really easy to do. I mean, you can just, I can think of about 20 different ways to tell whether the init system is actually Upstart or not. And actually, probably the easiest one is just, do that. If it's not running Upstart, so that will return an error.
I was just going to say that the OpenSSH packages in Ubuntu ship both Upstart and init scripts, and that's because, so for most things it's not too important, but for but people very often run SSHD in a chroot for one reason or another, and Upstart can't yet supervise that. Yeah. So I ship the init script just so that it's not hosing people who are running in a chroot. And you could, it's kind of slightly awkward at the deb helper level right now, but it's not too bad.
Yeah, I was going to say, actually, I mean, that would also solve that problem for Debian temporarily.
I was going to note there, too, is that I think that in practice in Debian, the only way we would ever get Upstart into Debian is if we was this ability to switch back and forth. Yeah. And we ran into that with Inserv. I mean, it's just we're not going to be able to just do a transition. We're going to have to support multiple init systems for some period of time, and then hopefully people will converge. Yeah, I mean, the other option we did talk about was this idea of having a support library or support binary which could read an Upstart job and basically do it as if it was an init script, but a year later, no one's actually been able to write this thing. It turns out to be really hard.
I'm not sure how much effort has actually been put into that, honestly.
Between myself and Michael, several weeks of work. Okay. Yeah, I've had a go at it, and I didn't manage to get it to work either. You can get to start them. You can't get to stop the processes again. Upstart relies on being in it to find where the process is.
PID files, so maybe synthesizing PID files. I assumed all along that you were going to synthesize PID files.
You don't know what the PID is. If it forks, you lose the PID. Yeah, exactly. And then you may as well just use the init script.
But you don't want to use an init script because then you can't migrate.
I know. But so maybe that's the right way to do this. As you say, maybe the right way to do this is instead to say, we can transition the Upstart, we can transition the sbin init binary to Upstart tomorrow in Debian very easily, and that would still continue to run everything exactly as it does today. And then allow packages to ship both, disabling the init script if Upstart's the sys5 init, it's the init daemon. That would allow you to switch backwards and forwards. You could install sys5 init reboot and still come up with the init scripts. You could put Upstart in reboot, come up with the mixed job format we have today. It would allow you chroots to work if you did that clause properly, because then chroot would come up with the init system as it was before. I can't really see any downsides here at the moment.
So regarding the somebody said, was it you, Russ, said that we can have policy mandates, or maybe it was Steve, we can have policy mandates all we like, but people will upload things. We do have auto rejects on certain linting tags now, and if we wanted to say we'll ship the init daemon as long as nothing relies on it alone, then we could have a linting tag that's auto-rejected by FTP master.
Don't we already have a policy, must directive saying that if you want to do something in it, you've got to provide SSV in it? All we need to do is said that if you also want to support Upstart, this is optional, not recommended now.
Yeah.
I wish you'd change that back.
I mean, yeah, in practice we do, because the init tab is a configuration file which is owned by a different package, so you don't get to go modify it. So if you want something to happen during boot, you pretty much have, essentially you have to do that. I mean, the first step for me would be that before we went down this path, we'd write a policy. We'd add something to policy that says if you ship an Upstart job, you must also ship an init script which does the same thing if Upstart is not running.
Yeah.
And if Upstart is running, it's kind of up to you, because you might want to do what Colin's doing with SSH, but for the most part, you want to not run.
Yeah. And then you may also have, later on you may decide that, for example, Linux systems like UDEV and stuff could just choose not to ship init scripts later on, but that would be later on.
I think that what Russ said, we don't actually need to change policy. We already have something that says we want to run something at init. You must provide an init script, and it has to be, you invoke something about run.
We could use the explicit, I think. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so what a couple people said here is we could stand to be more explicit. I suspect that policy, because it was never anticipated, the idea that you would not have a sys5 init system, probably doesn't ever somewhere explicitly say you must use the sys5 init system the same way it doesn't explicitly say you must use RM to remove files. It's kind of it was written with that assumption.
So curiously, it does seem to say the etc initd directory contains the scripts executed by init at boot time. So technically it's a policy violation for Upstart to run jobs out of etc init.
So yes, in fact, I think we need to make somehow explicit that there is technical agreement that we want to support also Upstart in Debian. So it seems that there is this kind of agreement in this room. We need to check if there is this agreement also elsewhere. But I mean, the fact that policy people agree with that is a very good start, of course.
Yeah.
So having it written explicitly in the policy that it is supported and what you need to do to use it, it's kind of needed, I think.
Somebody with a laptop files a bug on policy right now, it will help.
So I'm taking notes for the session. I have a Gabi document open on gabi.debian.net, and I'm recording everything. I'm not going to file the bug right just yet. Is it possible to have a reliable lintian error about this that we can auto-reject on?
Yeah, if the package ships something in etc in it.
Well, I think that if it includes an init script and if it includes an Upstart job and doesn't include an init script, and then I mean there are some cases where you might want to override that.
Yeah, then you can override an Upstart package.
I was going to say, can auto-rejected tags be overridden? Yeah. Right. So Upstart itself, or Upstart compat sysv, or whatever it is.
Itself.
Is it all Upstart now? Then that will need to do that. Right.
I mean, in this particular case, lintian should whitelist Upstart, because I don't like having the obvious candidates have to write overrides. But yeah, there's two classes of FTP master reject tags, one of which can be overridden and one of which can't. And for this purpose, I think there's enough reasons why you might possibly want to override in weird cases where the Upstart job is doing something that's unessential for an init script system, that it should go into the overrideable section.
Yeah. Yep.
Maybe go ahead and close out this thread.
Yep.
I'm going to switch.
Okay.
No,
please.
No, it was a different subject, so go ahead.
All right, yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to kind of make a plea from the user perspective, sysadmin perspective. I mean, they live and die by these init scripts. A lot of times sysadmins are going to end up writing their own. So if for squeeze +1 or whenever this is going to happen, if this is really the way Debian's going to go, it'd be nice if basically it were all or nothing from a sysadmin perspective, so they're not...
Yeah, I mean, the all or nothing's kind of complicated because it's a lot of work. But I mean, the Debian, let me be nice. The Debian release timescale is such that we could use a Debian release cycle partnered with Ubuntu to do the migration. I mean, we can work if that's important to Debian to migrate. If not all, but majority or whatever, then we can work with Debian to do that. I mean, we've got manpower to do that.
So one thing that's been done in Ubuntu to try to mitigate that concern is identifying suitable higher level interfaces that we can recommend to administrators that they use. So rather than invoking init scripts directly when you want to manage things, calling service for managing jobs being running or not, There was some plan, yeah. And if you run sudo service dbus status, what does that give you,
I
Scott?
can't remember, because that one's like that. Yeah, that one just gives you.
There we go.
And then there's also.
So unfortunately, the wrapper doesn't point you at service,
Yeah,
which is the generic interface.
Hot one does. Yeah, if you do xunit d dbus
Oh,
status,
okay.
you use the service utility.
Oh, you may also use the status, right?
Yeah, you may also use status, which is the Upstart native one.
So yes,
So we've done both ways. When we've migrated, we've also tried to provide education about the new way. Yeah.
So about that, I think the next step is deciding who is going to do the work, because essentially, so you very honestly pointed out that for Ubuntu it would be better for Debian to have that in kind of compatibility.
Yeah.
So on one end, we need technical backing of the choice. On
Yeah.
the other end, we need the patches, because I mean, a lot of Debian maintainer will probably not know about Upstart, and we need the patch to have both, to have the support for both services. So are you willing to submit the patches?
Yeah, so something we were talking about yesterday, or the day before yesterday, before everyone got killed on Coney Island, was that about having teams, there were teams that have worked between Debian and Ubuntu where they've had members of both Debian and Ubuntu in there, seem to have worked very well for collaboration. So my suggestion here would be that we create a team with Debian folk and Ubuntu folk, so everybody interested in this migration can be on there. I'll be on there, I'm sure Steve will be on there, Colin will be on there, people from Ubuntu will be on there, Justin will be on there who did the service utility, and so on. And people from Debian who are interested can join the team, and then as a team together, we will do this, do the conversions both in Debian and Ubuntu side by side. So we'll treat it as a cross-distribution project to do both. That I think would be the best way to do this.
So one thing that we've not talked about yet, but which is going to come up the moment we start discussing this on Debian Devel, is systemd, I believe, is the name of it.
Yes.
What? I've never heard of that.
So, I mean, there's going to be a technical question as to whether Upstart, if we're going to be changing init systems, whether Upstart is the init system we should change to, or whether we should be looking at something else.
Can I give you two answers to that?
I think the answer to that is pretty simple. I mean, we are not saying that we are going to migrate from System 5 init to Upstart. We are saying that we're going to support both. You can have the same answer for systemd, and if no one does the work for systemd, you have the answer.
That's exactly what I was going to suggest. I think if we do this as a team, then a group of people can work together to do the Upstart migration, and if the systemd folks would like to do the same work, that's up to them. I would say, knowing systemd pretty well, it's going to be much harder for them because they haven't built in support for actually still running init scripts alongside and so on. There are technical reasons I think Upstart's better. Systemd is very narrow focused on one way that all services should work. Upstart is takes a much more liberal approach and says that we've got to support existing services. We've got to, you don't just want to do socket-based activation. We're going to do socket-based activation, time-based activation, actually activating it on boot regardless, activating it when hardware comes up. So Upstart's a lot more flexible in what it lets you do. And I also said there's a political reason. I mean, yes, Fedora and Red Hat Enterprise Linux are going to use systemd now. Systemd is now the default in Fedora. But Upstart is the default in Ubuntu, which means now Ubuntu and Fedora are incompatible. You may as well consider them to be different operating systems. If you're a system administrator and you learn Red Hat Enterprise Linux, you do not now know how to admin an Ubuntu system. Likewise, if you know how to run an admin Ubuntu system, you do not know how to admin a Fedora system, Red Hat Enterprise system. Though I would say, if you know how to admin a Unix system today, you do know how to admin an Ubuntu system. Systemd is so different, you have to relearn how to admin it. The one thing I would say politically is, Debian and Ubuntu have this special relationship. I think it would harm that special relationship if Debian also chose to be incompatible with Ubuntu. But that's a political one. But I still stand by my technical design. I think Upstart is better than systemd. I think systemd is elegant, but I think Upstart's better. But
when it comes to policy, however, we might, if we put in policy about how Upstart is supported, there might be pressure to also create a similar policy for systemd.
I would word policy loose enough that it said alternate inits, you may support alternate init systems in your package provided you also support init, and that a group works to do the Upstart migration and makes it so the Upstart migration is more complete than the system demigration. So therefore, it becomes then a simple choice of, we have this alternate init system, it's already done 75% of the work. There's another alternate init system which is equally open within the Debian project, that's only done 25% of the work. It becomes a much more easier technical decision if you've done the work first. But that would be my approach to that.
Actually, I like that because it kind of fits in the long-standing policy tradition that when you start creating a policy that varies widely from the current policy, you create a auxiliary document which gets polished and ultimately included. So we can say that, okay, we'll start a auxiliary document for any alternative init system, and whichever one gets polished will get included.
Yeah, exactly. So Steve was just going to jump in first, but if you're on this thread.
I have another topic to bring up, so if we want to close out this thread.
Yeah, I was just going to follow up on that. That does suggest that it would just to be explicit, we should write an Upstart mini policy, and that could probably be largely based on the existing Upstart docs, some of which are quite kind of policy oriented. But would it be worth trying to distribute that with Debian policy, or should we be distributing it with Upstart or something initially?
I would say you should start distributing it with Upstart. That's usually the way we do this. Once it's in the Debian policy package, we want to be able to both consider it to be mostly policy for Debian and also follow the policy change procedure, which you don't want to do for your Bootstrap.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so apparently I had a similar topic to bring up, which is that we don't have a policy written for how Upstart jobs are supposed to be invoked from maintainer scripts. And before we start seeing lots of adoption of this in Debian, we should probably sort that out, especially given that the relationship between init scripts and Upstart jobs is going to be different in Debian than what it's been in Ubuntu to date.
Yeah, that was actually exactly the question I was going to ask, which is what is the invoke rc.d and policy rc.d equivalence for Upstart?
There isn't one today. In Ubuntu, I have been beating the drum that people should continue to use invoke rc.d and policy rc.d because those are specified and we have a wrapper that can do the right thing. But that won't work when we've got both an init script and an Upstart job.
I mean,
and
so
it has to know which one to do.
My technical feeling right now is I think invoke rc.d works reasonably well as an interface for maintainer scripts to do this. I think that the policy.d layer and what we expect of administrators who want to make use of it is really hard to understand. So I'm not a big fan of the exact way in which invoke rc.d is currently implemented, but I think having an interface which does what it's intending to do is very important.
So depending on where we land with this in Debian versus some of your upstream plans for additional features, how's that coming this cycle?
I think so there's Upstart's under development. I think we should make sure we land 0.6 in Debian because it's the stable supported one that's in our LTS. So the current version.
The current version, which doesn't have the facilities for administratively enabling and disabling jobs.
Well, we can...
Turning my mic off, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, we can fix that. So one of the things that doesn't quite let you do is enable disable jobs. But we can fix that in 0.6. If it's never really been a burden for us, but if there is a pressure, we can put that code into 0.6. We can add code to let you do that to 0.6 without having to jump to 0.10. That's possible.
Yeah, I think it's going to be important. Just speaking as a Debian user for a moment, we will want that facility, and we will want Puppet to understand the Upstart in its system and be able to do that sort of enable disable without just deleting the Upstart job, because deleting it is hard to recover from when you want to put it back.
Okay, cool. So we've got 5 minutes left. Just want to say if there's anything else, any different topics or concerns?
Yeah, new topic. Does Canonical require copyright assignment or for patches to Upstart?
Yes.
Is that going to change?
No.
Is that going to be a problem for Debian?
Well, except that Debian is not upstream for Upstart. Debian is packaging Upstart. So the fact that upstream for Upstart requires copyright assignment does not imply that the Debian package of Upstart requires copyright assignment. Right. And so basically we would be in the exact same situation we're in with GCC.
Yep. And if you want to know why systemd exists, that's pretty much the reason. Lennart Pottering does not like the copyright assignment policy.
I was actually planning on breaking that news to Manoj gently after the session. the fact that in order to get the SE Linux patches upstream, they have to be copyright assigned to Canonical. And you are currently having enough trouble with your contributions to Debian, I believe, with your employment.
However, they can go in the Debian package.
Would you like to explain to me in general terms what's involved, and then I'll go and write a patch?
The other thing as well to bear in mind, I'm hoping that Mark Shuttleworth is still on his private island, is that we can always carry patches in the Ubuntu and Debian packages which aren't in the upstream code while we sort this out. That is not. We've done that before. Some of the code from Palm existed in both packages for a while in this state because. Yeah. So just quickly, we think we've got 1 minute. So is there any other kind of concerns or? Cool. So we'll take some actions. We'll form a team. We'll get this together. Thank you very much, everyone. Sorry I'm late.